Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thanks so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. We are here in Rochester, Minnesota at the Lotus Health Foundation Symposium and Gala, and I am joined by a favorite guest of the show, one half of the Brain Docs, Dr. Dean Sherzai. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, and you definitely are one of our favorite people, and your story, your courage, and what you're doing is amazing.
I feel the same way about you and Aisha, who's here, but somewhere off, I believe, eating mango pudding at the moment.
That took priority. Sorry. It was either you or mango pudding. So
She made the right choice. She absolutely made the right choice. Obviously, here today talking about Alzheimer's prevention and lifestyle modification and how to mitigate the risk factors there. But I want to talk to you about an interesting thing that, to peel the curtain back, we were talking about earlier today, and that is the quality of research that's being done. And I've been talking about this on the show recently with a wonderful up-and-coming doctor in the plant-based space who I think that you would love, Dr. Roxanne Becker. She's been on the show a few times. And she is very much of the mind that the data needs to speak for itself.
Yeah.
And the wool is being pulled over our eyes in a lot of cases, and by and large, we're oblivious to it.
Absolutely. I think we are living at a time that our relationship with data is the most important thing that exists right now. More than the political situation, more than the economic situation, more than everything else. We are at the precipice of facing a deluge of false data, false information, falsification, and obscuring of data and gaslighting at a level that we have never seen as human beings. We have not been good with data in the past. And now, all of a sudden, we're going to be hit with a tsunami from all sides. And it's critical that we don't stand behind a camp. We stand behind data. It's important that we don't stand behind icons. It's important that we stand behind data and how to look at data, how to analyze data, how to prioritize data, how to look at the hierarchy of data. And if we don't do that, we are going to be going down the stream of being, thrown right and left by the next shiny object, by the next storm of marketing, by whatever people can do to obfuscate or get us emotionally involved because we are part of this camp or that camp. I'll be very direct. I'm plant-based. And and my wife and I, we've been plant-based for more than 21 years. Our kids were born plant-based, lived plant-based, they've thrived, they did amazingly, and even though they both graduated high school at age 10, and I lost my migraine, I don't use those as anecdotes. Those are anecdotes. Anecdotes are the beginning of a hypothesis that needs to be tested. Yet in the plant-based world and non-plant-based world, the battle is one anecdote fighting against another anecdote. And that's not what's going to do. I'm plant-based because of animals and environment, but I let the science speak for itself. And if we do, then we have a common language as humanity where we're not going to be thrown right and left. We're going to be running and surfing on the same surface, which is built by data and data analysis. We're not going to be awed by the next icon. Never make me an icon, never make my wife an icon, and don't follow any icons. I have more degrees than a thermostat, but none of those mean anything. None of those. And my kids, our relationship is that if the next thing coming out of my mouth does not have good reasoning behind it, meaningless.
Right.
So that, and we have to do that. And the plant-based movement has to do that. Because right now there's a lot of junk science in all direction, whether it's keto people or plant-based people. We make up things, we extrapolate things, we generalize things, we limit things to the infinite regress, because the more restrictive you are, the more pure you are. It's the old purist argument. It's become a religion. It's like, if they did this, I'm gonna go SOS plus.
Right.
What is SOS plus? I'm gonna go SOS and raw. Or I'm going to go SOS raw and just cucumbers. It's not going to work like that. You have to take society, community, and the science into consideration.
I can't imagine that a diet built exclusively on cucumbers is sustainable. They're delicious, they're nutritious.
They're fantastic. Yeah.
But you're going to be leaving a lot of stuff off of the plate, man.
Correct.
Yeah. So how do you check that bias, especially because you came into this plant-based world, not for the nutrition reasons, but for animals and the environment? And I think that a lot of times when people get involved in a cause, it's for a reason other than themselves, and that's even more important to the person than themselves. So given the weight of those two reasons why you came to this, how do you keep that bias in check?
All those have their own arguments. The ethical realm has its own arguments, and we can do that. We can make that argument separately if that needs to be. And that argument is being made by many people who have incredible capacity to make that argument. You don't have to conflate arguments, because in that conflation comes confusion. In that confusion, you lose people. But let the science stand on its own. And when it does go in a particular direction, let it go in that direction. And I think that's good enough. And if you don't, you lose the most important relationship you have with people and the silence of their homes. They're not beholden to follow you. One, they're your follower. Next, a little inconsistency, a second inconsistency, a third inconsistency, and you've lost them without you ever knowing you lost them. That's why the plant-based movement is frozen, if not shrinking. I'm sorry, this is going to be very unpopular, and it's going to be difficult for people, and people are going to go up on their chairs and yell that, no, we're growing with this and that. That's not the point. The point is that we are not doing much beyond our silos, even just in health, even just in science. But if we all work around the concept of scientific thinking and the hierarchy of data and reason, then we all join in one platform. Whether you're keto or this or that or whatever, you can come and say, this is how I judge my information. Anecdotal data doesn't mean anything. I'll tell you an anecdotal data which you've never heard or anybody has ever heard. I had migraines every week to the extent that I would actually be debilitated. I would be on the ground. I went plant-based 20 years ago, and within a couple of months, I had no migraines. And I have not had a migraine since. Now, that's a pretty amazing thing.
It is.
Yeah, but it's an anecdote. You know why? Why anecdotes are not the final story? Because there's confound. And we as humans exaggerate. We as humans remember the way we want to remember. We as humans, especially when we have a direction, we kind of obfuscate in that direction. There were other things happening at the same time in my life. I married Aisha. Could she have added to my lower migraine? I also started exercising more. I also had less stress from school because my fellowship was done. All of those things. So lots of things. That's why an anecdote is packed with confound. It should be the first step to say, this is a hypothesis. I'm going to look for some cases now, see if there are other cases.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a case, then case series, then it becomes retrospective, then you do a prospective, then you do a clinical trial, then you do randomized clinical trial, then you do a systematic review, then you do a meta-analysis. You're not done even then. Then you look at consensus report where the top people in that field with no biases, you check them. Are they getting money from this person, this person? And if they have none of those, and if they can check their biases, 10, 15 people come together, experts, the top people in that field, and look at the entirety of the data and say, the data has strong evidence in this direction. And we never make causality. We say it has strong directionality. And that's good enough. That's good enough. What's happened is we extrapolate way beyond the data. And in our household, we've painted the walls so you can write on them. And then you can clean it. Yeah. And one of the things is, don't extrapolate beyond the data. Don't extrapolate beyond the data means that we have a tendency. We did a study on curcumin and cedars. Yeah. And we looked at the retina. Retina is a continuation of the brain. And we were the attendings that looked at the patients and everything. And the papers published showed that curcumin bound to amyloid. Amyloid is the protein that's bad in Alzheimer's, that accumulates in Alzheimer's. And then the combination would disappear. Wow. Anybody else would have said that's a cure for Alzheimer's.
Right.
They did the same thing with one case of coconut oil and Alzheimer's, and nobody even saw that case, by the way. and it became $1 billion business. Here we had curcumin binding to amyloid and disappearing. That's a good case.
Yeah.
No,
No.
because that's just evidence of those compounds binding. But now we don't have a clinical. You have to do the clinical work to see if the cognition was improved. You have to do the clinical to see that lowering of amyloid in retina is the same thing as lowering amyloid in the brain. Now you have to look at the fact that is this few cases the same as generalization of the population? We're not even close yet. So that's why we have to stand with the layers of science, how we look at data, how do we make conclusions. And if we do that, then guess what? Diet wars disappear.
So here's kind of how I see it. That what you're talking about to get to a definitive, well, as close as we could get to a definitive answer, to get what you would qualify as quality research.
Correct.
That takes a lot of time.
It does.
You and I, everybody here at the gala and the symposium, we live in a world where people want the answer, they want it now.
Correct.
That's an awful hard thing to combat when you're trying to tamp down these flames of one story is the gold standard, man.
Correct. Right. And it is. It's a human nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
Human nature is survival. We are a fight or flight a species. We have the fight or flight and rest and restore, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Your body didn't care about it cared about surviving. If I make a mistake 10 times in a row, overreading the fact that thing moving in the bushes is a lion and it's not, it's okay, I still survive. But if I misread one time, I'm dead.
Yeah.
So it overcorrects for survival. It wants the immediate, it wants the now, it wants to know the thing that's going to make it survive. So we have an intrinsic bias. But as humans, we also have another thing that circumvents evolution, that circumvents our natural tendencies of immediate survival. That's frontal lobe. That's the thinking brain. We as species will not survive. We will not survive if we don't use our frontal lobe to come together around how to look at data, how to look at things long term, how to look at things beyond our immediate biases, and find a common denominator that's even beyond the fact that, oh, this might actually lower my chance of dying. Well, wait a second, didn't you say that's science? Yes, but then you can say, although fish, there's no evidence that fish is unhealthy. And when it comes to brain health, there isn't.
Right.
The data shows that, in fact, that if you have 1 or 2 servings of fish, you actually do better. That's fine. I can live with that. I don't eat fish because now on my own, another person has made that argument, and there are videos and films and everything says that we're also destroying the oceans. By 2045, we're going to have a fraction of the ocean that we have now. I can't put that as part of this data. This data stands on its own. Fatty fish, 1 or 2 servings a week appears to be good at this point. We don't have a contrary data at this point that fish is bad.
Even with the mercury and the toxins that
they haven't
people often
found.
talk about?
Yeah, in tuna there's mercury, but the smash, salmon, mackerel, and all those, they haven't found enough to make that kind of an argument. And then the epidemiological data shows that it is beneficial if you eat 1 or 2 servings. But what is beneficial about it? It's omega-3. Do I get my omega-3 in other ways? Yes. And I can then say, yeah, the data shows this, but also if somebody's interested, there's another layer of life beyond the health. It's global health. I love David Katz's take on this. Yeah, it's not about just my health, it's about planetary health as well, right? Then you can make that argument as a separate thing, but you can't obfuscate this thing because of this.
Right.
You can't say, oh, because I really want them to believe that the oceans are, let me just make this into saying fish are poison. We can't. Or, oh my goodness, a horrendous crime that we've committed by saying that there's positive data that maybe a certain amount for certain people of olive oil might be okay.
Brother, you tread lightly on this crowd, man. Olive oil, that is a hot topic. Man.
Let it burn. I mean, if data makes people angry, even if they think we're wrong, because the data is data.
Yeah.
Not leaving enough room for that kind of conversation, then it already has become a cult.
Right.
It has become a cult. Conversation, database conversation, and making sure that we, as honest participants in a conversation, give room for that space. One of my favorite books is by Stephen Covey, Speed of Trust. you sit in around the table around two kinds of trust. Trusting the other being, even if it's parent-child, husband-wife, boss-employee, trusting integrity and capacity. If you somewhat believe in their integrity and capacity and you're talking, then give that chance. Have that conversation. Let it seep through and see what comes through. If you don't believe any of those, then don't sit.
Yeah.
You don't have to listen to me.
Yeah.
I'm here to talk. I'm here to give you that I do the research. I'm the executive director of all clinical research at Charles Drew. I was the head of research at Loma Linda. I'm not saying that the bias of somebody who has expertise. No, I'm saying that I know some of the things. So at least, hopefully, I'll bring some of that into this conversation. But I'm also completely open to changing my view depending on data.
All right, so let me take this to kind of an extreme level. If study comes out, say in the next month or two, that says, "Oh my gosh, we were completely wrong about red meat. It, is not carcinogenic. It can actually cure as opposed to cause heart disease. It's beneficial for preventing Alzheimer's. Eating a steak."
Yeah.
You would be open to that research?
No. No, I'll tell you what that means.
For ethical reasons?
No, not for ethical reasons. No, first of all, for ethical reasons, I wouldn't eat it even if then. But I wouldn't be open to that study being used as the grounds for change in a concept. In order for you to change direction, one paper, even a powerful paper, is not enough.
Gotcha.
There has to be multiple papers. There has to be reproducibility. There has to be other third, fourth parties that do the same study without bias. And if it's reproduced multiple times, then you say, yeah.
Yeah.
And even in that case, I wouldn't eat meat because of animals, but I would say, hey, the science says that. That's your choice. But I think in 21st century, whatever that's saying can be compensated with this, and this. I'll make that argument, but I'm not going to make the argument against the data. But one study does not make an argument. Speaking to plants, the number of studies that speak in that direction is just overwhelming. Even, by the way, even the Mediterranean diet is not a Mediterranean diet. It's a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
So we did the studies, the California teacher study. Aisha was the primary researcher. She won the American Heart Association award for that study, 133,000 people looking at Mediterranean diet and stroke risk. Guess how they measured Mediterranean diet and how everybody measures? They don't look at it by saying, oh, where did these people come from? Were they from Italy or were they from Greece? Or no, they score them. They give you higher scores for greens, beans, legumes, plant-based stuff. And one thing there is sources of omega-3. So sources of omega-3 could be chia, flaxseed, or fish. And then you get a lower score for meats, cheeses, dairy, and sources of saturated fat and ultra-processed food. So what is that? That's plant-based. So that's all of Mediterranean. Mind diet, which is the study done by Martha Morris and Rush University, it's plant predominant. And then all the Loma Linda studies that we were part of, and the Adventist Health Study, and many others, they're all plant forward. I mean, the number of papers that show, the number of studies, the number of reviews that show directionality in here is not going to be reversed by one or two even great studies. By the way, we don't have great studies.
Yeah.
There's no ketogenic paper, there's no ketogenic study that's more than 6 months and more than 30 people. And the endpoints are so small that they're not even significant clinically. I mean, in a majority of cases. So that's definitely not going to move the bar. The number of cases, palm oil and coconut oil. Coconut oil, this huge behemoth of the information, and you go to every airport. There was for a while coconut oil and this and that. All of it based on one case.
That's good marketing, man.
It is good marketing.
Yeah.
So the way you would change your mind, or at least your mind about that, is large stream of data of all types, clinical trials, case studies, epidemiological studies, retrospective, prospective, meta-analyses, and a bunch of them by many different people. Then you say, I have a pretty good confidence in this direction.
Yeah.
Then not one paper.
Yeah. Could you foresee a time in the future, whether in the near future or distant, that we're able to properly treat that?
Yes. So there are two kinds of dementia, Alzheimer's dementia. Those that are driven strongly by genes, presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and APP. Those, the key here is early diagnosis.
Yeah.
So I see a time where with a simple spit test or with simple blood draw from the finger. You can do a whole slew of genetic tests and it will tell you where your risk is.
Yeah.
20 years early.
Yeah.
And if you have one of those genes, then the interventions can be started earlier. Genetic modification. We do genetic engineering now. That will be affected genetically.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely. And we're very close to that. The others are lifestyle induced. There's a genetic component, but lifestyle is the big driver. Even then, early diagnosis is important. Early intervention is important because if you can affect the lifestyle factors like nutrition, exercise, stress management, sleep, a lot of sleep apnea patients, and mental activity, you reduce the chance by the most conservative numbers, 40 to 60%, by our extrapolation, as much as 80 to 90%, if you do it early enough. And that's good enough. Because if we can forestall, 7 million Americans have the Alzheimer's, if we can get 80% of those to be pushed back 5 to 10 years, by that time we will have cures.
Wow.
That's good enough. We don't have to make up things to be the superhero of the moment. When we wrote our books and we were doing the research, they asked us, if you just hint at the fact that you can possibly reverse Alzheimer's, nobody checks you in today's world. Even you can make up numbers, you can make up science, and we publish in journals, and nobody's going to care. And you'll sell 2 million extra books.
Yeah.
So no, we can't. We will not. There's nothing more important in this planet right now than the ethics and the methodology of science. Because that's what's going to join us as a humanity around a way of speaking, a way of looking at data that we cannot dispute and we can all work around it instead of being siloed into little camps.
Yeah.
Or divided on higher meta level of arguments. Data is data.
A couple more questions here. How do you, and I see you as being very important in your neutrality to march us forward in the interpretation of this, but we live in a world where we are surrounded by pseudoscience and it shows no signs of slowing down. If anything, it's just accelerating. And more of this untrustworthy data is appearing. When I was a reporter, I got burned out doing death and destruction. There's only so much you could take. As much as you love the work, there's only so much you can take. What are you doing to prevent yourself from experiencing that type of burnout?
I'm a hyper optimist.
God bless you, man.
But I think it's data driven.
Okay.
There's nothing in this universe more sticky than reason. And the story of human journey is a slow ascension of the floor of our knowledge and consciousness and awareness of how to interact in complexity. We see this. I mean, imagine 2,000 years ago and the language and how much we knew and how much we had to, superstitions and believing. Now we are, just the other day I had a conversation with a friend of mine, which I never thought that I would be speaking in this way. And we started talking and he said, oh, that's a logical fallacy. I'm like, oh my goodness. Logical fallacy has become common language. That's a huge lift. Now, somebody can't use ad hominems, somebody can't use overgeneralization, somebody can't use all the logical fallacies. We've become familiar with that. So now that's lifted the conversation. The other thing is, 200 years ago, if a Hume or a James or a Locke would write something, it would take 100 years for their writing to get into the right ear. People didn't have access. They didn't have the knowledge to read, a Locke or a James or any other philosopher, Descartes. And if it did, it would slowly move bars. We were lucky that a Jefferson read Locke and Hume and Montesquieu and all of that, and that was brought to the surface. But much of the time, it wouldn't. It would just dissipate.
Yeah.
Now, as much as we hate social media, I think social media is magical. It has its negative because the algorithms want you to be superficial.
Yeah.
They want you to be agitated so you can be at the agitation, just sell and buy. But that kind of data is available all the time. It's 99.999% garbage.
But every once in a while.
But 0.001% gold, where that one young lady in the basement of their grandfather is bright as hell, and read a bunch of things, and somebody made an argument, they make a counter argument, which is amazing, and it goes on Instagram and becomes viral. That just lifted the floor of understanding about that topic. And that becomes sticky because reason is sticky. No matter who they are, no matter how famous they are, If they just jump at you and say, no, only eat meat, nobody believes them anymore. Even the people that eat meat, they don't believe it.
Yeah.
They don't believe it. But that one person that found that argument and made a beautiful new clarification of that argument comes to the surface, gets stuck, it becomes a meme. Memes are heuristics, which is general understanding of concepts that become ubiquitous in population. It is viral. I am incredibly optimistic. And that's what we have to do, all of us. We just have to work on not protecting our camps. We just have to work on creating higher level language of reason, and we will be fine.
And let's end with the big question. You talk about getting out of those silos, getting out of our camps, reaching across the aisle. You said...
it's not about reaching across the aisle, because it's not like I'm trying to be popular among the non-vegans. There's no aisle for me. Gotcha. The only aisle is arguing the data. That's it. And then when you do that, if you see some of our videos on social media, somebody says, like somebody said about ketogenic diet, we countered it by never attacking that person.
Right.
We countered it, we tried to counter it. Well, not we, my wife, who's much smarter and much better looking and much better in everything.
Oh, you're a handsome man.
Yeah. But she did it by addressing the data, but in a very concerted, organized, and almost sticky way. Then you never opposed the person. You just brought people to a different plane of argument. I think that's the way to do it. I hope that's the way to do it.
So you made that interesting comment earlier that I didn't get a chance to follow up on, but I will end with the question of, you said that perhaps the plant-based movement, the vegan movement, is in a time of regression, or maybe it's dying. Is that because we've become so siloed and there's a lot of infighting even, and everybody are in these small little camps? If you're on the outside looking in, none of that really seems particularly inviting, in my estimation.
You're 100% right. I don't know if it's dying. It's not going to die, because there's incredible, just the ethical argument behind it is just powerful.
Right.
It's not going to die. The environmental argument behind it is powerful. The health argument behind it is powerful. It's not going to die. But how do things grow? Things grow when it becomes a cult. And it does. They grow. But it's still siloed, because you have to convince people around that argument, that very, very niche argument. Things grow when they have a commonality with a greater population. Our work is in the communities. My passion is the communities. I don't go to change the communities. I go to understand the communities and bring Mediterranean diet to Southeast LA. Doesn't mean I'm going to bring Italian food. It means, how do you change, or how do you bring back the food in the African American communities and the Filipino communities that has got more plants, or has healthy elements than not? That's it. So community work is everything for me. And if I go there and say, because I went to some plant-based conference and everybody was talking SOS, no meat, no cheese, no butter, no salt, no sugar, no avocados, no olive oil, no oil at all, and sometimes go raw, there's no Sherzais.
Yeah.
And this is injustice to the communities that are suffering 4 times the dementia, 4 times the stroke. In some communities like Native American, we suspect as much as 6 to 8 times the death rate from these things. And I want to go as a purist, arrogant purist, saying, go SOS and raw. That's beyond ridiculous. That's beyond elitist. You can make the argument of the data justly and soundly and effectively by listening to the community and seeing where there's a foothold that you can actually bring to them, and where they can take ownership of that as well. It can never be top down.
Yeah. My friend Will Bolsowitz uses the term progress over perfection. And I remember the first time I thought about that, I was like, you know what? That's right. Because that SOS plus, I mean, it may work for some people, but it's a lot of times it's just completely unrealistic for a lot of communities for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And I think that even if somebody does have the means to pull off that particular diet, it's pretty off-putting and shocking to the system to go from one way to the other overnight.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely impossible. I mean, I've worked in these communities.
Yeah.
First of all, the reason that every community study has failed is because when academicians go there, they go with a survey, they collect data, and they leave. You have to create relationships. Leadership is not imposing. Leadership is listening and understanding. If you want to understand people, understand where you can actually make one change that comes from them that is aligned with health. And then when you do 2 and then 3 and then 4, or they do the 2 and 3 and 4, then it's unstoppable.
Yeah.
Unstoppable. The community fairs that we have in LA, we never say plant-based. But they know what our proclivities are. I promise you that out of the last 3, the communities would bring food, community members would bring food to disperse. It's all been plant-based. And we keep saying, we never said plant-based and we never said vegan, but they do it anyway. Because we don't impose. And then they do it anyway. But we said, no, you should go 20%. And see for you, what 20% makes most sense.
Yeah.
Because once you get people to work around their own proclivities, then it becomes stackable, then it becomes addictive, then it becomes an identity, then it becomes culture, then it becomes life.
You're turning pessimistic Chuck into optimistic Chuck today, my friend. I'm loving it.
We love you and we love what you do, and it's critical to have these conversations. Some people actually would see this and because they have internal biases, they would say, oh, this is so angry or so opposing, or you're dividing. I'm not. I'm hoping that we are all coming around data.
Dude, I love it. I love it so much. And thank you so much for being here. Would love for you to come back and maybe we'll nerd out in some data next time. This was a very high level conversation. I mean, this was pretty incredible what we just talked about.
I would love to. I would love to talk to you guys about the community work we're doing.
I would love to hear more about that. So let's make that happen in the near future. We'll bring Aisha here. Hopefully by then she will have finished her mango pudding.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And yeah, man, just thank you so very much for being here. And your podcast, really quickly. Let's plug that here.
Yes, we're very proud of the podcast. It's Your Brain On, and it's top 20 in sciences. And it's fairly new, but it's growing rapidly. And we love the fact that we bring the top scientists. Again, they all know what our proclivity is. It's plant-based, but we've spoken with people across the board. And it is civilized conversation. I told you we will have a conversation about gluten this coming week.
Yeah.
And we'll have a conversation about meat with a person, Matt Nagra, which is a good friend of both of us.
Matt. Yeah.
And then Chavez, who's not a vegan, and then others. And have a civilized conversation around data where we can actually take a directionality. And directionality is good. Perfection is not. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good, and the direction is critical.
I just love the civility of it.
Yep.
I mean, that's what it is. Like, put down the pitchforks.
Yes.
Let's just talk.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's just talk.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I'm glad that we got to talk today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.